My name is Dave Wheatus, and I am the Executive Director of Serving Leaders Ministries. In my role, I serve as a counselor to ministry leaders and pastors, and I also do a lot of mediations as well. I get to see the underbelly of ministry and sometimes the ugly side of conflicts. And my experience has been that most people don't address their issues. They don't try to work out their conflicts in a godly way. Most people really sweep things under the rug. They think they can find peace by just not addressing things, but they remain bitter, angry, resentful, and oftentimes it perpetuates division in the church. Recently, I was asked to mediate a conflict between a senior pastor and a key leader in a church. I met with them individually, and it was really clear that they were frustrated with each other, they were hurt, they were angry, but it was also clear that they both wanted to reconcile and do the right thing, the godly thing. And so I took them through a mediation process. Both were able to talk honestly with each other about their offenses, their issues, and it was beautiful to watch it. I was really impressed with their honesty, with their willingness to work it out. And what struck me at the end of our mediation was that they got up and they spontaneously hugged each other. And as they did that, it really touched me. And I thought to myself, wait, instead of just moving on, why not give a gift to the church? And I suggested that to both Tim and Ross. See, many Christians don't get to see conflict resolved well. And I thought, why not tell your church, give your church a gift and let them know about your conflict and how your conflict was resolved. They both bravely agreed to do that, and this interview is a result. Tim Brown, you're the pastor of Grace Covenant Church in Exton, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And Ross Shearer is a former member of Grace Covenant, but you were a key leader at Grace Covenant. And I want to welcome you both. I want to tell you how much I appreciate you being here and being willing to talk about some hard issues. And so I'll be asking you some questions about the conflict that you guys had for over a year, really, and also how it was resolved. So let's start this way. You both worked together for 5 years in ministry. Back in the fall, let me ask this. What happened to make you both aware that there was a problem in your relationship? Tim, I'll start with you.
Well, in October, Ross made an appointment to visit me in my office. And right out of the gate, he announced that he and his family had made a decision to leave Grace Covenant Church. I was really surprised. I mean, the thought had crossed my mind. We had had some issues over the previous 6 months, especially. Man, I knew the meeting was coming, but I kind of put it out of my mind that it could possibly be that severe.
Right.
I mean, Ross and I were really close friends. We were mutual accountability partners with a third person together since I had first arrived at Grace Covenant.
So you both would meet regularly?
Yeah, twice a month. We were in each other's lives, holding each other accountable for very personal, spiritual, formational things.
Wow.
Yeah. And we worked together in ministry, right? So since I'd first come to Grace Covenant, I introduced an idea of doing missional communities, and Ross had joined the task force at the very beginning, where we spent 2 years preparing an initial startup group to try to beta test it and then launched it out. And so we spent lots of time. Ross was part of our small group in our home called the Missional Community.
Okay.
And then he oversaw the other groups that were forming that were birthed out of that original community.
And as I understand it, Ross had a relationship he was mentoring your daughter?
Yeah, that's right. So very engaged with each other.
Very engaged with each other. So he walks into your office basically and says, hey, we're leaving the church. I've made this decision. Okay.
Yeah, I was just shocked. And I felt personally kind of hurt. I just kind of wondered, like, well, what happened to the Matthew 18 process of like, if your brother sins against you, go and show him your fault. And if he isn't won over, then bring someone else. And I felt like all of a sudden we were like way to the end, and I didn't even know how to respond. I was just like
just blown away,
just trying to listen well at that moment, but inside it hit pretty hard.
So Ross, why had you decided to leave the church?
Yeah, so that decision actually was a really quick one and surprised both Kim and I too, because we loved Grace Covenant. We loved the people there. We put our heart and soul into doing the things with the mission community. But there's two things that kind of happened. First, the thing I think that kind of happened was we realized that missionally the way that I was going, and where I thought discipleship should go and the church should go was very different than where Tim was leading the church.
So you had a difference in philosophy and
difference in
implementation. Yeah.
Mhm.
And by the way, what is missional community?
Yeah, mission community is kind of like a small group where you're getting to know each other really well, but also it's a huge outward focus of reaching the community around us.
Okay, so it's different than small groups that meet once a week
Yes.
for Bible study alone.
Yeah.
You're really involved with people's lives.
Yes.
All right. So you're saying that there was a difference in the value placed on missional community.
Mm-hmm.
All right. What was the other thing that caused you to want to leave and make that decision?
The other thing that happened was that we, in an adult discipleship meeting that we had together, that we had a really significant conflict that was left unresolved for a week or two before we kind of like try to work it out.
Right.
But that played a huge disconnect between Tim and I.
And so I get that there's, difference in philosophy and there's a conflict, but you decided to leave without even telling him, that you'd made before you made the decision. How come you were going to just leave quietly?
Yeah. So, once it really wasn't even the conflict itself that had us leave. We were still committed to the church. It was that mission focused thing that like was the kind of the bigger deal. We had always said that if the church had moved away from the missional community mindset, that we were going to probably leave.
Right. But you were going to leave quietly.
Yeah, quietly. In a lot of ways, I think because I didn't want to talk to him because we had that disconnect, but at the same time, also I didn't want to like make trouble for Tim. I don't want to make him look bad. I just kind of like wanted to pull off the Band-Aid and just like kind of get it over with and just kind of like ride quietly into the night as much as I could.
Right. So you both started by talking about what happened in the fall, but the seeds of this conflict and the choice to leave really happened long before that. So could you take us back and help us understand how did the conflict begin and how had each of you been offended by each other?
Yeah, so it really starts back actually when Tim first got to the church. We connected, like Tim said earlier, we started doing accountability with each other. We started working on the mission community thing. We were in a launch group for 2 years. And in those 2 years, we got to know each other and kind of dream about how to get everyone involved in the mission community, like small groups, in all these groups. Well, when we launched that January, it didn't go as expected.
Okay. So you're dreaming about this for 2 years. You're planning it.
Yep.
And it's a sort of like a dud.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, and in a lot of ways, like, I think I realized at that point, if we were going to do this and do it right, it's going to take a longer time. We're going to think very strategically about it. On me, I don't think I ever really communicated that to Tim. Okay. And so that kind of started the seeds of miscommunication from the very beginning.
And from your perspective?
Yeah. So when you go back to that point in time of January when we launched and began the other groups, and 2 of them started, but then one of them failed right away, and another group didn't adopt the missional community model that we hoped that they would.
Right.
There's a bunch of expectation gap there that I think we were both experiencing disappointment. And part of that too was that I wanted to ask Ross to engage a little bit differently with the leaders that he was overseeing. And some of those expectations were clarifying in my own mind over that period of time between January and April. And by April, I really had a head full of ideas of things I wanted to communicate to Ross.
Okay.
So I went ahead and I told Ross that I wanted to talk with him about those things. And Ross told me at that moment that he wasn't able to, he just was too busy. There were too many things going on to have that conversation right now. Right. And but I just we were already in the same space together. We just finished up one of our accountability meetings.
Okay.
And I just pressed right in, and I spent about 5 minutes telling Ross some of the things that I saw that I believed that needed to be changed.
Okay, so in your enthusiasm, because you've been thinking about this for 3-4 months, you're like, hey, and you tell him for 5 minutes, here's my ideas.
Yeah.
But he had already told you, I can't handle this right now. I'm too busy. Talk to me in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. I kind of viewed myself as just kind of giving him the prelude. I wasn't really letting him have everything. Right. I mean, I thought, in my view, I didn't realize what I was doing in terms of how he was receiving what I was doing.
Right. And so how did you receive that? What was that like for you?
Yeah, it was, I was surprised. I was hurt. I remember actually calling my wife, Kim, right afterwards and going I can't believe this just happened.
Mm.
It was kind of shocked. It was very shocking.
Because what he felt like he violated a boundary.
Yeah, violated boundary. Yeah,
He didn't respect your desire to, hey, can we just hold off?
Yeah,
because you were in a real busy season at work.
Yeah, April's my busiest season in the entire year.
Okay,
it was really hard. And I know Easter's coming up with Tim. So.
And so he in a sense forces a conversation with you that you didn't want to have, and then that evening you ended up sending him an email.
Oh yeah, so the very same day I just decided to get all my thoughts out, and I sent Ross about a 1-page email and commended him for his work, but I don't think he was able to hear that because I'd already kind of really crossed that line.
But you didn't know you crossed the line at the time.
I really didn't know.
Yeah, and so when you're sending him an email, you didn't know you're still crossing a line.
Yeah, I looked at email as like something he can read on his own time.
Yeah,
Okay. Whereas I think he thought I think Ross believed that I was prompting him to respond immediately because I'd sent an email within such close time frame. And it expressed a sense of urgency that Ross interpreted as just bearing down. And that later come to find out that really, really hurt Ross.
So basically, we're going back to the seeds of the conflict, right? That went way back here. And so one is the difference in missional community outlook and how you're implementing it. And secondly is you're offended. You're basically offended by Tim because he's not respecting your boundary. All right. Then what happened then later? Another event happened where you were really offended.
I finally did have a time that we were able to kind of talk about what happens in that conversation. And I waited until after Easter for Tim, and I had another event that I was traveling to San Diego for. And so we found a sliver of time where I was able to address some of his concerns, but also talk about that conflict. But even in that, I didn't go far enough of resolving it, and then also miscommunicated in a way to Tim that I did not want to work with him with Mr. Community anymore, which is not what I meant to do, but I communicated in a way that kind of made him feel that way.
Right. So there's this slight attempt to sort of straighten things out, but it seems like it got worse.
Yeah.
Because you actually told him or miscommunicated to him, I don't really want to work with you.
Yeah.
Senior pastor, I don't want to really work with you. We're doing this missional community thing, but don't be involved.
Yeah.
Okay, so you must have been hurt by that, offended by that.
Yeah, I didn't really understand it. I mean, I think Ross was trying to work within the structure of our leadership, and there was another elder that was overseeing it, and he just told me that the elder and he would let me know how things were going, and I thought, that doesn't work well,
right? And let me guess.
And yet he wanted me to engage actively in communicating it to the rest of the church, and we designed it from the beginning together.
Right.
And so,
now let me guess. At the time that happened, you didn't say, "Hey Ross, can I just clarify something with you?" You didn't do that
I wouldn't
at the time, right? And that's how things go. When we have conflict with each other, when we have misunderstandings, we don't get the full picture, right?
Yeah.
All right. Then what happened? Then there was one more meeting. I understand that there was a big offense for you, Ross. What happened?
Yeah. So in September, we had met, and in that summer, Tim and I had met with the head of the adult discipleship team, and that ended up being a really good meeting about the new direction of small groups, and there was a lot of questions that had to be answered. And that summer ended up being crazy, not only for myself, but for the entire team. We thought we could meet a lot, to figure out a lot of those questions. We met once or twice. It was a very difficult summer. And so in that meeting in September, Tim came in with a lot of questions that he would hope that would be answered. And in my head, I thought we knew what we were going to do. I'll let Tim kind of talk more about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I would say our personalities, and actually we get along, we have very different personality styles and how we engage with people and with one another and with tasks and everything else, And there's this growing gap of communication and misunderstanding. And I'm in the process of trying to adapt our ministry model in a new way to help bring this forward and involve more people. And so there were just these unresolved questions from Ross and unmet expectations in me. And that frustration just kind of kept rising up. And in the middle of a meeting, I just started asking Ross one question after another about my expectations. And so you raised my voice in front of other people. And I really hurt Ross very, very deeply in that moment.
Okay. Yeah. So basically you're, in a sense, cross-examining him in front of people. and you're feeling this energy from Tim that's really offensive for you.
Yeah, it hurt. We often talk about like, kind of fight or flight, but what I have a tendency to do is freeze in those kind of situations. And as he was doing it, I kind of like averted my eyes until the conflict was done. Where I look back and it'd been great to like take Tim out and go, hey, what's happening? I just froze.
You froze.
And I didn't know what to do.
Sure.
And I was hurt, and there's a lot of other feelings I was feeling, but I wasn't sure how to handle them or process. And yeah, it was hard.
And again, Tim, at the time, did you know that you had offended him deeply?
I know when I look back on it, I should have apologized to Ross right away because I could tell that I'd hurt him.
You could tell him at the meeting.
I could tell even, it was pretty clear based on the way that he, stopped engaging during the meeting. But, I just think our lives were just going really fast and we weren't slowing down for each other. I don't think we were working on our friendship very much anymore. We were working on ministry and we're kind of side by side, but we'd like kind of both lost the anchor of our common shared.
And that's a really important point because you say you're working on ministry. In other words, I'll put it in a crass way. You both start to function for each other or for the church. And the relationship becomes much more functional than it does relational.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah. During that season, it was just, we didn't do anything really socially between April and October. No, we were friends and they were in our home for a small group. And even the small group itself, that when we're in it is work in a sense, And so we weren't working on our relationship and sharing just shared space or just, again, we just didn't slow down long enough to say, we need to talk about this before we try to do this with other people or lead a team or lead groups or anything else. And I think that was the biggest mistake that we both made in that process is we just didn't take the other one aside, really slow down and really clarify what was happening inside of ourselves and with each other.
So you have these multiple conflicts over a long period of time and some attempts to resolve, but the tension remains. So how did it come about that you decided to consult me and have mediation?
It was obvious after Ross announced that he was leaving that the things that I'd perceived were much more hurtful than I'd realized. And so I wrote an apology letter to Ross. I just wanted to let him know that as a friend, I was really, really sorry. And I wasn't trying to ask him to come back to the church, but I did want to reconcile with him. And so I asked if he'd please be willing to meet with me. And I told him I'd be willing to meet with anyone that he would feel comfortable helping us do that with.
And honestly, Ross, you weren't willing to meet with Tim alone. Is that right?
Yeah. It had been like, so after I told Tim that, but even before that, I had about 3 weeks of just conversations, either trying to figure out if we should be leaving the church. And then even after that decision, 2 weeks of, having to talk to people about why we had left. And I was tired. These are all people that I loved and cared for, and they were tough conversations. And so it's kind of like, okay, I'm done. I've left. We'll get to like talking to Tim and resolving this in a few months. In time, but not right now. And it really was. I mean, it was brothers in the church and then friends outside the church that said, hey, resolve it. And you got to figure this out.
So it's pretty common when you go through these kind of experiences over a long period of time, you do get exhausted. And then the emotional thought of leaving and the decision, do we leave? Right? So in a sense that you had the best of intentions toward him and you're just going to let it go for a while thinking we'll resolve later. But you're, Tim, sitting there going, oh my gosh, my friend, this guy who's been so important is leaving. He doesn't even talk to me about it, right? So that had to be both really painful for you. So I met with you separately to hear each of you, and that's normally what I do at first. Is I meet with you separately and say, hey, what's going on? Tell me your story. So what was that like for you? Just meeting with me individually, Tim?
Well, it was helpful. First of all, it was a relief to be able to talk about it in a very safe environment. And you asked a number of questions to just become familiar with the situation. And so the initial meeting of just you and I talking, I really felt like I had the liberty to just talk about it and I could be honest and, answer questions and explore what was going on in me. And I remember even after the very first 3 or 4 minutes of talking, you said, I think you just learned about 20 years worth of ministry experience. I still remember that because you just, it was good for me to be able to talk to someone that was outside of the situation, but was really listening well.
Right. And Ross, what about you? I met with you. What was that like for you?
Yeah, it was terrifying.
I terrified you.
Yeah, and you're like a kind person. I knew who you were, but I never going in there thinking, okay, Dave, I want to kind of like give my side of the story, and Dave's going to say at the end, "You're an idiot. You should have never left." But yet, like, you listened, you didn't judge, you just heard and you listened, and that's when you talked about, I think you should go through the ladder of integrity.
Yeah. So for our viewers, let me explain the ladder of integrity for a moment and just to help them understand the process. So a ladder of integrity is something that I use in ministry mediation. And it's really a tool that is designed to help people clarify what values they have and how the values have been violated, because each of you had violated each other's values, right? You've been offended by each other. But the thing is, you don't really realize it. So the ladder of integrity helps you get in touch with that. So it also takes you through a process of steps, and it gives you language to talk to each other. So instead of you starting out by saying, let me tell you why you offended me, and here's what you did wrong, you start out in a much more calm way, and you say something like, hey, the issue on my mind right now is the conflict that we've been having. And so that softens a little bit the interaction, but it also prepares you to communicate honestly and communicate really well. Now, what I do is I have each party do their own ladder of integrity, and then I meet with each party separately and I teach them some big skill that a lot of people don't know what it is. You know what the skill is? Listening, right? Most people don't know how to really listen, actively listen and get the other person's side. You don't have to agree, but you have to get it. So all behavior makes sense when you understand context. And that's a key thing, because when you start to do a ladder of integrity and you hear the other person's perspective, you go, oh, that makes sense now. It makes total sense that you felt like that. It makes total sense you felt like that, right? And again, you don't have to agree on the facts necessarily, but that's another part of it. And instead of just blaming each other and pointing out your fault, the ladder of integrity also has a section where you say, my part in this has been. And I want you to read each of your sections of my part, just to give our viewers an understanding of that section, because most of the time when we're in conflict, we want to point to the other person. And even if the other person's 95% at fault, we always have a part. There's always something that we've done to contribute. So, Ross, you want to start with my part in this has been? Even though you felt really offended, right, by Tim, just read slowly for us my part in this.
Yeah, my part in this is, at times I was not honest with you about how I was feeling over the course of the relationship. There were times that I didn't really stand up for myself or express myself to you honestly. For example, the adult discipleship committee meeting, I should have pulled you aside during the meeting to talk about what was happening. Or the next Friday, when I confronted you in your office, I could have pressed in when I didn't hear you apologize, but did not think it was really an authentic apology. Or when I felt you were not answering the questions I was asking you.
Yeah. So you get to be honest. And even though Tim really offended you by cross-examining you and speaking harshly, you're recognizing that, gosh, I could have done this. There was a part that I played here. And had I maybe pushed in and said, hey, Tim, can I help you understand how that hurt me? That would have taken the air out of the balloon, so to speak. All right, so Tim, you had your part. So what did you say in your ladder of integrity?
My part in this is that I hurt you through my actions, which induced growing distrust. I was overeager in not respecting your request for postponement in April. I was driven toward improving the quality of our ministry, in my eyes, without really taking time to clarify what that meant to you, Ross. I avoided talking about the bigger picture, about like whether the missional community model and the coaching resources that we had acquired were really truly a good fit for us in that season. And then also my part of this was that I expressed anger and criticism toward you in that meeting, and didn't apologize afterward.
So during the mediation, for both of you, what was it like for you to say that section, my part in this, or just to even read the latter? What was that like?
I think one of the things that I realized the way I looked at forgiveness in the past was that sense of, like, hey, like, you did this to me, you're terrible, but I forgive you. But with the latter integrity, it was this kind of like, hey, we had conflict and you did hurt me, but here's all the things that I brought to the table. And it was good for me to like really kind of see what it was. What are the values that I was bringing to the table? What was my history that I was bringing to the table?
Yeah.
Is really helpful for me to kind of like to think through that a little bit more.
How about for you, Tim?
I felt like the letter of integrity helped me to really speak with a lot of clarity toward Ross, but from a position of my own stuff, out of integrity.
Yeah.
And it forced me as well to reflect on the things that I had to take responsibility for in the conflict and really put the spotlight for myself on me.
Right.
And it was hard work, but it was really worth it and very fruitful.
Yeah. So one of the things that I love about the mediation process is that we don't gloss over the problems. We don't just smooth them over, sweep them under the rug. And we don't gloss over feelings of anger or pain or the facts, right? We're not trying to make nice. What we're trying to do is get to the heart of the issues. And as I said before, all behavior makes sense when you understand the context, right? So another section of the ladder of integrity, which I think is sort of revealing, is the section where you Ross talked about some of your stuff and as to why you didn't approach Tim, why you didn't push in and say, hey, wait, you offended me. I need to talk to you, right? And we're not making excuses here, but it's a way of understanding.
Yeah.
Read that section if you would.
The behavior you see in me as a result of this is that I tend to avoid conflict and I have a tendency to move on from relationships without resolving the problems or issues. This is a pattern I learned early in life. I have felt overlooked and sometimes not respected over the course of my life. I did not learn to address things directly, but developed a pattern of overlooking conflict. Conflict was never really modeled when I was younger. And then when I was in college, I learned it was easier to move on from relationships when I thought they would get hard. So the behavior you experienced from me was my conflict avoidance and my sensitivity to feeling overlooked and disrespected. Therefore, what you saw in me was freezing or withdrawing. In the adult discipleship meeting, I froze and broke eye contact until the conflict was over. I didn't want to deal with it. I was angry, but I didn't know how to respond right there. In other instances, I didn't know how to respond when I felt ignored. Sometimes I would say something, but it felt too difficult to get full closure. I moved on too quickly, and sometimes I did not say or do anything to let you know how I was feeling.
And so one of the things that I think is important for people to realize, and what I love again about this process, is that we take what we learn from our families of origin, we bring them into the family of God, and we try to just act the way we did back before Christ, right, in our families of origin, and that way we just sort of perpetuate problems. We don't learn conflict resolution. If your parents didn't do it, or your family of origin, so why would you? Why would you know? And so you just look back on your life and you say, hey, there's a pattern for me that when I have conflict, I move on. And that's exactly what you were doing here. So one of the discipleship issues here and one of the sanctification issues here is that we learn, wait, we don't do it just like we did it before. We try to do it in a more godly way in the family of Jesus, right? So I thank you for sharing that. Did you want to comment?
Yeah,
on that?
let me jump in on like my experience too, because I experienced something different, but just from a different side of my own experience and my own weaknesses as a sinner as well. One of my weaknesses is just trying to please other people.
There you go.
And I wanted Ross to be happy. And so even when we were making some of the tough, very critical decisions early on in the ministry, and I knew Ross wanted to do it a certain way, I tended to favor Ross's way of doing it, even if inside I had a gut check.
Okay.
And I just kind of thought it's better to have Ross and the model that Ross wants than the model I want without Ross.
Right.
But in the end, that proved fatal because the truth had to come out, right? There wasn't a perfect alignment in the ministry model and the coaching we'd chosen in our context. And so but the irony is, because I wanted to please Ross, I ended up not pleasing Ross.
Yes.
And not pleasing myself.
Right.
And the letter of integrity forced me to look deep into that process as a leader and think about, like, what did I do? What was my part? And my part was pretty far upstream, but then it had residual effects as the relationship and as the process went forward.
Right.
And that the letter of integrity like really helped me to be vulnerable about those things that I had done that were sinful as well.
Right. I'm so glad you raised that, because these are such important points. And you know, one of the things that you said, one of the things this does is it helps you identify your own core stuff. It's like you, Ross, were saying, like, you know, I'm a conflict avoider, and you're saying I'm a people pleaser, right? And so that people pleasing manifests itself all over the place. If we have a core issue, it's going to leak out, right? So what you said was really important. I think I want everybody to understand that early on, when you were planning missional communities, you were sort of swallowing hard when Ross was going in a direction. But I need to keep him on board. It's better to have him on board and happy than have him leave, right? But that was like a seed of that was the seed of destruction.
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
And he was very, very close. I mean, like, we're talking about nuance in ministry. And if you've been in ministry for a while, you know that, like, some little perspectives can be really big down the road.
That's right.
And so I just underestimated the severity of that moment.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah. And so, but now you have enough humility as you look back on it and you go through this mediation process, you go, okay, this is part of what I'm learning here. And I just love the fact that, you know, you think about the lessons you're learning and how you take that now into the next 20, 30, 40 years of ministry, right? So the seeds of destruction also become the seeds of redemption, so to speak.
Yeah, Dave, that's even like avoiding conflict. I worked very closely with my wife as I like kind of she helped me write the letter of integrity. Yeah. And there's a lot of aha moments, not just with like, it's not like I just avoided conflict with Tim. But my wife, and she's awesome, but she was like, by the way, like, this happens with us all the time.
Okay.
And I started to realize, like, oh, this is a pattern, not just with Tim, but with many relationships in my life.
Right.
So,
yeah, that's beautiful.
Well, I think that's where it gets real, right? Because when we lean into the things that break and we see, like, we're willing to be humble and go back and say, why did that break?
Right.
It shows us our brokenness. And I think that's what sanctification is about. I mean, it's like, you've got to be willing to own the stuff you're carrying.
Yeah.
And if you just gloss over things, you miss the opportunity to do some self-disclosure and self-assessment and bring that back to the cross.
Yeah, and see, the shame of it is, like, let's just say you guys had decided, we're not doing mediation, we're not going to reconcile, we're okay, we're fine, right? You would have carried with you conflict avoidance into your next church, into your family. You wouldn't be aware of it. You would have carried the people-pleasing thing again and again and again. That's why this is so redemptive. That's why I'm so excited about you guys and what you're willing to talk about and just do this, right? So let's wrap up by just talking a little bit about some of the lessons learned. You know, you just mentioned a couple. How has this made a difference in terms of your relationship with each other?
After we were done with the mediation process, we actually got together, my wife and I and Tim and Sarah. We had lunch and spent, like 2 or 3 hours just building upon the relationship again, which is great. In fact, it's funny, you know, it's been a joy to kind of work on this project together. And obviously conflict still came up, but I feel like we had the tools to kind of like work it out and figure out the solutions to it in a way that was honest. I didn't like back down.
Right.
We like, instead of just heeding people please, I didn't avoid conflict, and we like kind of figured it out. It was great. It was a good process.
That's amazing. Yeah. How about you, Tim?
I think, first of all, this was just important because I view Ross as a friend, you know?
Yeah.
And I realized pretty quickly after the announcement that they were going to leave that was final. I couldn't change that.
Right.
And there wouldn't necessarily be a renewal of ministry again like it had been, but we could work on our friendship still. And this gave us the platform to bring about that reconciliation.
Right.
Even if it wouldn't totally restore the ministry that we shared, we could at least we could reconcile in our relationship, and we could feel comfortable seeing each other in public and in all kinds of environments, as opposed to like avoiding each other at the store or something like that. You know, we didn't want to do that. We wanted to be able to talk and share life again.
And how about organizationally for you both? You know, you both are working in ministries. How would you say that would affect you now as you've been through this mediation process?
For me, it was effective because it helped me to look at myself as a leader and the ways that I was engaging. Like, because I was people pleasing, that was causing problems in the process of leading in ministry and sharing relationship. And so getting back to some of those core issues in me helps me move forward as a better leader. And that was essential.
How about for you, Ross?
Yeah, organizationally, you know, coming out of it, I've definitely been telling, you know, I'm not a pastor of a church, but, you know, like coming out of it, I'm at a new church. This is one of the things I talk about often is this mediation process, the ladder of integrity. You know, the way that I did conflict before would be like a doctor, you know, trying to clean out an infection and going like halfway down and going, okay, this is going to hurt the patient too much. Let's just kind of like, we'll finish there. The infection's still there. It's going to get worse, but I don't want to hurt them too much. I kind of said like it's like wounds over, you know, or it's like bandages over like it's still a bad wound. Right. It never disappeared.
Right. So in other words, it's painful. To go after the infection, but it's best. And then the wound heals, and it even can be stronger.
But the other thing that I've been able to communicate to people is, and you know, as we've all kind of dealt with like COVID-19 and the coronavirus, is to stop. In my own life, I may feel like, man, there's something not right with Tim and I, or it's someone else, but oftentimes I'm so busy helping or so busy being the life of the party or so busy doing something that I don't actually really check myself with like, okay, what's going on in life. And the time to just slow down and kind of figure out where am I at with so-and-so, or where am I at with this person, or where am I with just myself. The ladder of integrity really helps you to slow down because it takes time to kind of figure out, okay, what am I bringing to this? What are my values? What am I contributing to this conflict? And what is the conflict in all honesty?
Right. Yeah, that's beautiful. So if you knew your friends or other church members were having conflict, what would you recommend to them with respect to a mediation process?
Do it. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think people fear a mediation process because they think they're going to get back in the ring with the person, and that the mediator is going to be some kind of referee, you know, and you said that, and then how'd they feel, you know? But this was a lot. It was very different. It was a process where we actually looked inside of ourselves and then expressed ourselves with integrity to other people, to the person that we were in conflict with, and I'd highly recommend it.
Great. So I want to thank you both. You both been extraordinarily brave. You know, most pastors and leaders don't get up in front of the church or go on, on YouTube and tell an issue, right? But you have been vulnerable. You've been brave. You've been humble, and I think you've given a huge gift to the church. And I really appreciate you both doing this. So thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, you're welcome, and thank you for your part. We appreciate your role. Thanks, Dave.